Hi, everybody. So we're so excited to be here today with Lisa Erdle, who is coming to us from the organization Five Gyres. And Lisa, we'd love it if you could just introduce yourself and Five Gyres and what that's all about.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Dr. Lisa Erdle. I am an ecotoxicologist by training. So I study the effects of plastics and chemical contaminants on the environment. But I don't just do science for the sake of science. My work at Five Gyres and our research in general is really trying to do applied research to test, so not just understand the magnitude of the plastic pollution problem, but try to find some actionable next steps. A lot of my research has been focused around the small microfibers that shed from textiles, understanding how they move within ecosystems, where they end up, what their effects are when they do get into wildlife and us. And then what are the solutions just to help keep them out of the environment in the first place? Because this microfiber pollution from textiles is one of our biggest microplastic problems.
We're so excited to chat about this today. Just before we get into the microfibers and all of that, can you just tell us what gyres are and what that actually means, the five
Yeah.
gyres?
The Five Gyres Institute was a research institute founded 15 years ago. At the time, there was really a mythology of plastic pollution in the environment. Some of the first reports of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch were just coming out and they were in the media. What we did is we set sail. We've now sailed over 30,000 nautical miles to all five of the subtropical gyres, which are these accumulation zones of plastic pollution due to wind and water currents. You see much higher concentrations of plastic in these ocean gyres. But what our research has really taught us over a decade and a half is that these accumulation zones, like other places, are not a floating island of trash. It's not something you could plant a flag in or stand on or even see. If you're sailing through the middle of these ocean gyres on a calm day, it just looks like little sprinkles of confetti, these small
Right.
microplastics. So the problem is really that of a smog of the oceans,
Right.
of this small microplastic pollution.
Wow. And just quick question, how many did you sail to personally? Did you
I've
get
gone I've gone to some of the most concentrated microplastics, um, some of the areas with the most highest concentrations of microplastics. I haven't been to the middle of an ocean gyre, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of sailing in the Great Lakes, which what we've learned is close to shore, whether it's San Francisco Bay, where we've done research, or the Great Lakes, close to population centers. These are some of the highest concentrations of microplastics. And really
Okay.
because our science has improved and we've gone down to smaller and smaller size fractions. When you're in the middle of a gyre, you see a lot of fragments from discarded single-use plastics and fishing gear, but it does tend to be quite dispersed. When you're close near shore to where people live, like in cities, you see a very different characteristic of microplastic pollution. You see a lot of fibers from textiles. Those tend to be the most common particle type. Those are a little less common in the middle of the oceans, but it's something
Okay.
that we see especially in lakes or in oceans close to cities.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for explaining that.
So I think obviously we're really close to the subject of textiles and plastics and synthetics equaling plastics, but I don't know that everybody really realizes how much of their wardrobe is made from what is effectively plastic and that will break down as microfibers. Is it so can you tell us more about just the textile industry and do you know like how big an impact it is having itself on plastic pollution?
Yeah, the impact of the textile industry on plastic pollution is quite massive. Textiles represent the second most discarded type of plastic after single-use packaging. So, in terms of sheer
Wow.
volume of what's discarded, uh, a lot of it is textiles. There has been 8,300 million metric tons of plastic produced. A big chunk of that is textiles, and the majority has been discarded, ended up in landfill or incinerated. In terms of global textile production, the share of what's synthetic, which is plastic, these are things like
Yep.
polyester, nylon, elastane, a lot of common names that people are probably familiar seeing on clothing tags. These are all plastics. And at the global level, over 60 of all textiles produced are synthetic. And the share
Wow.
of synthetic textiles keeps increasing every year. So the percentage
Oh,
of synthetic textiles being used is continuing to grow. Um, and we are seeing still massive growth in our textile use and disposal.
and is that primarily a cost driven? Like I find that's like first of all that it's over 50% is plastic when you think of
Mhm.
clothes, you don't think of plastic that you're wearing
Plastic.
plastic. And then the fact that it's increasing, is because it's cheaper or because it's more like technical or like what do you think that like when you know there's so many negatives to wearing plastic, why is that growing?
Yeah, there's a few different things. So, our share of plastic in clothing is growing because it's cheap. Like you said, a lot of cheap polyester and nylon is much less expensive
Mhm.
to make. In some ways, these are products that are artificially cheap because we're not accounting for the full
Yes.
cost of fossil fuel extraction, of production, the emissions, what's
Well,
happening to these products at the end of life when they end up in the environment or in landfills. They're huge subsidies for the fossil fuel industry. For a long time, plastics were plan B for the fossil fuel industry. We've started
what?
to see that shift with more growth in green energy and more plastic production overall. That's continuing. We're still seeing an exponential growth in plastic production. It's also that it's easy. A lot of production facilities manufacturing plastic garments, it can be faster. It requires less steps compared to some of these natural fibers, which
Right.
can have long supply chains, require many steps and spinning,
Which
whereas plastic fibers are just extruded out like spaghetti, and you can have
Consistent.
lots of consistency and dyeing and performance too. A lot of athletes that I know that spend a lot of their time outdoors, whether it's on sailboats or on top of mountains. A lot of them say that, cotton, so if you're wearing all natural fibers, it could potentially be a dangerous thing if you're in these really extreme environments. But for
Really?
for the majority of us, we have a lot of other options where you don't really need to wear synthetics in your everyday to day. You don't need to have that high performance synthetic apparel in your day to day life. And for regulations, some companies incorporated more and more synthetics to meet various standards, whether it was
Huh.
fire resistance. So having a blend of different textiles, sometimes they're easier to include additive chemicals like flame retardants. So there's
Yes.
a mixture of reasons why over time we've seen this shift, but really, money is the bottom line for a lot of these companies. It's cheaper and easier to produce plastic clothes.
Know much about what effect that those plastic microfibers, when we're wearing them as garments, are having on our skin and on our health?
Especially with like if you're heating, like hot yoga or athletes
Yeah, when sweating, your
or
pores are
Mhm.
open.
yeah, we're just interested about that because yeah, I'm thinking I'm
Yeah,
42 and I'm even thinking of hormones and I know like plastics, there's like some that look like estrogen and like all these things that I'm just becoming more aware of and I'm yeah, what do you know in that area?
yeah. So in terms of textiles, when we are wearing them, they can shed microfibers. These are fibers that can end up in the environment or we can breathe them in. We see fibers deep in nasal passageways in the olfactory bulb that connects the nose to the brain. Scientists are finding these fibers. They're also the most common particles researchers are finding in lungs. So there's that shedding aspect where they're going out into the air. Many people have probably seen these fibers floating around as dust.
Wow.
Yeah. On a sunny day, you're looking in a bright sunny window, you won't see these colorful specks of dust. These are fibers that are coming maybe from your clothes, but also from carpeting and other textiles. The majority of them are likely synthetic, depending on what you wear. And then in
Hmm.
terms of skin contact, these are particles that are too big to go through the epidermis. So your body isn't absorbing any of those physical fibers through the skin. But we do know that textiles have many chemicals associated with them. The latest estimates are around 5,000 to 6,000 different chemicals are associated with textiles. These are dyes, things that give textiles different properties like flame resistance or
Yep.
waterproofness,
Softness.
anti-smell. A lot of these are finishes that are applied in textiles, but there's many different types of additives that are in the whole textile manufacturing process. So you can have many, many dozens of chemicals that are on a garment. Some of these can leach from the garment to your skin and then to your body through that skin contact. So when you sweat, it's especially more likely your pores are open. You have a higher likelihood that some of these chemicals can go from the clothing that you're wearing into your bloodstream. And of all of these chemicals that are in textiles, some of them are known carcinogens, some of them are endocrine disrupting chemicals. And
Yes.
we don't have great toxicity for a lot of these chemicals that are in use. There are some of the most harmful chemicals that have strict bans, and there's been more scientific research from the scientific community. Sometimes it's a game of whack-a-mole. More chemicals pop up, and in the United States, where I'm based, there is a lack of any sort of precautionary principle where companies have to
Yeah.
show that these chemicals are safe. They're sort of innocent until proven guilty. So they can be used until that scientific evidence builds, and then they eventually get banned. That's what we see with perfluorinated chemicals or PFASs. These were used for many, many years as waterproof chemicals, which have been phased out of things like tents and rain jackets and various garments, but they were used for many, many years before that scientific evidence really built and it was shown how harmful these chemical additives were.
I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but part of this series of interviews we're doing right now about kind of plastics. We talked to the amazing women that run a company called Glad Rags, which is menstrual care products. They're out of
Yeah.
Portland. And in part of that interview, it came up just the amount of PFAS that have been
Oh
found
my
in
God.
menstrual care products, like alone. It's just
In
shocking.
disposable ones. Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what is so are those chemicals, are they coming like at what point of the production process are those entering the garment? Is it the dyeing or is it the construction of the plastic microfiber in that case? But I know these chemicals can also, from listening to other interviews you've done, can also
Mhm.
come from cottons as well.
Yeah,
Non-organic.
sometimes
Yeah, yeah, it'd be good to yeah, so many places.
sometimes these are chemicals that are ingredients, like in the case of rain gear, perfluorinated
Mhm.
chemicals were intentionally added as a way
Yes.
to make these garments waterproof. In a lot of cases, we're seeing trace levels of PFAS because they're in equipment, they're in manufacturing equipment, or they were used for a number of years in factories and have been phased out, but still those chemicals exist. These are forever chemicals, and once they are in the environment, they don't disappear. This is like microplastics that
Yeah, yeah, that's
once they're in the environment, they're not easily cleaned up. So a lot of the solutions are really preventing them from getting into the environment in the first place. We're still dealing with this PFAS issue, and we're going to be dealing with it for many years because it's in water, it's in air, it's in snow in remote parts of the world, and we're seeing that now with microplastics too. A lot of places where these persistent chemical pollutants like PFAS are turning up, we're also finding microplastics.
As an end customer, I mean, this is very overwhelming. It's like, where, where do I go? What would you recommend to them if they're purchasing textiles? Obviously, we all do. What are we supposed to look out for as customers if we are concerned about that chemical leaching aspect?
Mm. Yeah, I sticking, with brands that you trust is a really big one. Brands that are doing very careful vetting into what sort of chemicals are being used in the dyeing and manufacturing process is a big one because we don't have an ingredient list for our clothing and know every
Yes.
single thing that has gone into it. You might know that your t-shirt is 80% cotton and 20% polyester. Even something that's 100% cotton can still be up to a third chemicals by weight, and these are
Wow.
dyes and other finishes. So there's a lot that can be added to these garments. So working with purchasing from a brand that you trust, also, a lot of these chemicals and for microfibers, some of the biggest exposure is for newer garments. We ran a
Mhm.
campaign on Five Gyres last year that was called "Do Less for the Planet" because there's so much pressure that people are under to buy the right thing and to make a million and one choices. It can feel overwhelming. But what we know from the textile side of things is that new garments shed more microplastics than old. So buying things like buying thrift,
Sure.
buying from a secondhand store, you have a smaller environmental footprint from a microfiber side, but just an overall environmental water use of all the things that go into producing that garment in the first place. And washing less is a big one as well. There's lots of things that you can do once you have a garment to better care for it and make it last longer and have a smaller microfiber footprint while you're using it.
I ask a quick
Yeah.
question about that stat that you were saying that a conventional cotton t-shirt can be one third like pesticides
Or
or
chemicals.
chemicals. For like the average customer, when they buy a cotton t-shirt, you can think you're buying something natural. How would you describe the difference between an organic cotton t-shirt and its effects on the wearer and the planet versus a conventional t-shirt? Like one, how would,
Yeah,
because some people don't understand the benefit of organic. I don't
yeah.
think they to themselves and the planet.
And it's more expensive, but you don't have that pesticide exposure. Those pesticides can remain in the fibers and then via skin contact could potentially go into your bloodstream. And it's just in how it's grown too. Cotton can have an incredible regenerative impact, when it's grown, or it can be really hard on systems, whether it's water or land use. So a lot of that organic label goes a long way. I also think it feels different. I think a lot of this organic cotton,
Yes, it does.
it tends to be softer and just has a better feel to it. And that's not something you always can pick up on if you're shopping online and you don't see those garments sort of side by side, but there often is a pretty big difference. Just anecdotally for me, I'm not so much an expert on cotton, but many folks I know can pick up right away the difference when they're looking at a garment.
Yeah.
I know in our industry, Lisa, a lot of the brands that position themselves are green are using recycled plastic and in big letters like recycled plastic hair ties or recycled, they don't polyester, they don't
Or
necessarily use
recycled nylon
recycled nylon.
for like a hair tie
Uh,
instead of
How
virgin.
how should we as customers view recycled polyester or nylon as compared to traditional just virgin plastic?
And
Oh,
compared to something that would be just like, for example, we just use organic cotton and natural rubber. Like for a customer, if they see something's recycled, sometimes they think, oh, is that better recycling than doing a natural like what is better for me and the planet? Like how do they all line up?
there are some new rules coming into effect where you might not be able to call it recycled anymore
What?
because the reality is that it's not true recycling. in many cases, a downcycling from things like a PET bottle into polyester, and you can't go back. Once you have downcycled a bottle, a plastic bottle, into a polyester garment, it's not going back the other way. And there are some technologies where you can, instead of mechanically recycle, you can chemically recycle those garments, but they have a huge environmental impact. And what we've seen from other plastics is that the promise of chemical recycling, pyrolysis and gasification, it has never it has never worked. The economics of it really are not netting out. These are very expensive facilities to build. In many communities, they're seeing this necessity to keep feeding the beast, where you need to keep shoveling material into these facilities for them to have enough material to be able to keep running. And there are
Yes,
many
very exact.
negative consequences of it. So when you have a textile, and at least in some cases for plastic recycling, you can have a high density polyethylene jug, and that can be turned back into a jug and a jug
Right.
again.
Yes.
There is a degrading over time. The number of times you go through those recycling processes, the plastic bonds can start to break and it becomes less durable. But when you have a bottle and it gets downcycled into a garment, it's sort of a one-way path, and often those are not just going to landfill. So it only extends that plastic's life cycle by a little bit. It adds one step, but you're essentially, it's not much different than virgin. One difference that we're starting to see from the science is that some of these recycled polyester just aren't as durable. So when they're washed, they can shed more microfibers than the virgin.
Yeah.
There are these real challenges, and as someone who studies how these contaminants are entering into the environment, uh, it's also a major route through recycled polyester, that you can have these contaminants from the recycling process. Plastics can act as a sponge and absorb chemicals from the environment, and those stay in the plastic when it gets turned into polyester. Nylon tends to have a slightly higher recycling rate, and being able to turn nylon into nylon again. So the recycling rate is a bit better for polyester, but you still see this impact where once it goes into a textile, it often is quite a dead end for garments and doesn't get recycled back into something else again.
See, this is interesting because I do the product design and we've always stuck with like organic regenerative materials just from the beginning. It wasn't even trying to be plastic free. I was just like, okay, if it's from nature, it should be able to go back to nature as harmoniously as possible without doing any science or anything, just real baseline.
Mhm.
And since this time, as we're looking at, there's a lot of innovation in textiles. There's textiles made from corn, from seaweed, algae, from mushrooms. Like there's so many things and we're very aware of it. But as we, go to look at other ways we can make hair accessories in innovative, fun, fashion ways, it's the thing, like it can say recycled nylon and then like 80% organic cotton, but I'm just like, I don't trust, or it says it's biodegradable,
Mm.
or it's it's like made from plants, but will it break down? Like, because it's so
Right.
chemically modified, it probably breaks down as a microplastic, even though it was 100% organic input because it's been restructured so much. So it's an interesting time for like trying to stay in the innovation and bring these new textiles to our customers, because companies are wanting to get them out there, right? They know they need solutions, but I don't want to be creating even any more microplastics. I'd love to give the cleanest possible solution there is. What are your thoughts around like just staying pure as a purist or trying to find a bridge? Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great, great question. And I'm so glad you asked it, because It's something that can be really challenging to parse, what is preferred material. We know that a lot of these regenerative natural materials are tried, tested, and true, both in how they are produced and having benefits. And when they have reached the end of their life, they will biodegrade, whether it's natural rubber or cotton. These are things that are going to go back to the earth. There are these novel materials as well, and it is exciting, but I think we should all have our spidey senses up a little bit because there are a lot of these false claims or claims that have not truly been vetted. Now,
Yes.
something that is made from plants is not necessarily biodegradable. You can make a plastic from
Yes.
corn that is chemically identical to a durable fossil fuel based plastic that does not biodegrade. It'll just fragment into smaller and smaller pieces, become microplastics, likely nanoplastics in the environment, having these impacts on wildlife and human health. Now, there are some biomaterials that are biodegradable. And these are materials like PHA or PBAT. There's a number of really sort of novel materials that are out there, but without adequate testing and testing from a third party organization that's really doing the
Yes.
work to
Yeah.
understand
I
what
was
is
trying to
happening when these are ending up in the environment. Do they actually break down? Is really essential. And from some of our research, what we see is that something can have a claim as biodegradable, but it might not actually break down in the environment because of the various testing scenarios that was done when that had a claim. So it can be really important to lean on other third-party testing organizations that have very clear designations of, what makes something biodegradable or compostable or not, especially for these new
Well,
materials.
I'm so excited to know you now because I have a list of product, like really cool. We don't do lace, and lace is amazing, but so there's so many things I would love to introduce, but I'm just, I'm so conservative because I'm like, right now we're so clean, and it's taken so long to do that, all the way through to our organic cotton is made by nuns and they've been doing organic cotton for how many.
I mean, 36 plus years.
So knowing how clean even that facility is, right? No PFAS in there. Like it's just, I don't want to accidentally let something come in because they say it's going to into our supply chain and just. So anyways, I can't wait to talk to you about
And
this
there
more.
are a number of regrettable substitutions where something looked really good on paper,
Yeah.
Yes.
but then we've learned farther down the line that something was not actually better in practice. So it's really important that brands, decision makers are asking these questions and looking to the science to choose materials that are going to be less harmful to people and the environment. But it's hard and it can't all rest on the consumer to make all those choices. Nobody has a testing lab inside their house to be able to look for these things. But brands, they can really do their homework and be testing and figure out what's the better material and talk about why they're doing it because I think a lot of people really care.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Lisa, one of the reasons we're hosting these interviews right now is because we feel that like in our experience, so we started KOOSHOO in 2012 and we had this run through the 2010s where everybody was just felt like everybody was pulling the rope together of like, let's make our planet cleaner and greener, like for the betterment of all for our future generations. But here in 2026, it just feels like the feeling has shifted and rightfully so. Like life is so expensive. We're all feeling that. There's all of a sudden we have a trillionaire in the world and there's these people that get to almost live apart from us, it feels like, and have their
They've got their
own
own
rules.
rules.
And then there's these wars and it's just like to ask the average consumer to reduce their plastic almost feels unfair. So part of why we're getting the fortune of speaking to you today is wondering like, can you help us frame going kind of reducing plastics of what's in it for us? I know you talked a little bit about that Do Less campaign, but what is an individual if we aspire to use less plastics in our daily life, including in our textiles? What benefits do we gain?
I think from a human health standpoint, what's in it for us is less exposure. There are microplastics all around us, and we're never going to get completely to zero. There's this pig pen effect. We live in a world full of microplastics and they're all around us. They're in water, they're in our air. We're not going to fully eliminate that. But research shows that choices that people make in what they buy, what they eat, what they wear can have a measurable impact on our daily exposure. And I think that there is there's so much news all the time about do this because it's a healthier option, do this because it's better for the planet. It can feel like a lot, but there's also so many beautiful choices in products and innovative things that don't require plastic. I think we'll look back at movies from the 80s until now and think that so many of these plastic products just look
Yeah.
so tacky. And I think, as we start to learn more about all of the human health impacts that plastic is having on us, a lot of our choices from this time will really regret. And we're just starting to scratch the surface. It was only 15 years ago that some of the first estimates of how much plastic pollution in the world is out there, and the research is quite new on what the impacts are on human health. But we know that there's over 60,000 chemicals associated with plastic. We don't have a great plan for all of this plastic that we're producing and that's ending up in the environment. And it's, small choices that we can make to simplify our lives, to make it cleaner, to make it more enjoyable. So it's not just, avoiding the bad, it's looking towards the beautiful. And sometimes these old methods that have been around for many, many generations of what people have used to make products and hold food and
Yeah.
put on their bodies for clothing.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. I love that. It's kind of like simpler and lighter, like
Yeah.
less wrapping, let's just keep it. Yeah. See what's in it. It's just like transparency with everything.
It's very intuitive when you kind of stop and think. It's like, yeah, of course that makes sense. Like sometimes I think we get caught up with the pace and the consumerism of it all, but if you actually just stop and think about,
Slow down.
slow down, yeah, at what we're wearing, what we're using, how much we're going through as individuals, I understand.
I also love the thought of like, as you were saying, we'll look back at these movies and we'll see all this cheap packaging and stuff. And you'll be like, oh my God, how tacky and gaudy was
Yeah.
that period? And I think about like how long has cotton been used, you know, organic cotton, because that's all there was originally, has been used compared to plastic textiles. Like it's even like with medications, like you really want to be using things that have been trusted for generations and generations. Because the proof is in, like it's living proof. Or with these new things, you're saying 15 years? Like
Yeah, there's no
there's
long-term health study available about plastic.
Long-term health studies on plastics. They haven't been around long enough. Plastics were invented in the 1950s. They haven't really
Yeah.
been around very long. And science is only starting to scratch the surface on fully understanding. There's a lot of money that gets thrown at medical devices and
yeah.
pharmaceuticals and medicines, but the amount of research that understanding plastics and the chemicals associated with it really pales in comparison. And there's a lot of money to be made in the plastic industry and in global plastics treaty negotiations that have been on the last couple of years. Industry lobbyists tend to outnumber the scientists there by about 5 to 1. So there's a lot of money to be made in the plastics world. And the science, where we tend to be a pretty scrappy group that are trying to answer some of these questions and improve our understanding. But we do know enough to act. We don't need to wait until more and more science pours in. All of what we
Yes.
know now really is pointing us in the direction that we need to avoid a lot of our plastic use, find alternatives, and overall just use less. And like you said, simplify our lives and turn the dial down on consumerism.
Yeah. It sounds so
Consumer.
much less stressful, all of it, less toxic on so many levels. Just a
I
little
know. And
question. Yeah,
as a
please.
new mom, I'm looking for any excuse to simplify my life and have
Yes.
less stuff around.
Totally. Constant, every size, yeah, there's so many things for every stage. It's just interesting because I'm not a big, Jesse is my news station in our house because I'm really unplugged from the news. And it's just interesting for me to hear that policy. So governments are wanting to keep plastic production high. And I just like, it's just so crazy. Like, can you just explain that for me? Like, why do they want more plastic when we know science is proving it's not great for us and the planet? They just want
Yeah,
to keep getting more oil. Like, what's the bigger thing happening here?
it's a big revenue generator. It's a use for oil. A lot of the oil producing countries don't want to see any sort of limits on how much plastic is produced, but the majority of countries want to make sure that there is a cap on plastic production, that there is transparency in what goes into plastic. There are a number of countries that are calling for better governance around plastic because right now we don't have any global rules on how much plastic is produced, how it gets traded, what happens to it at its end of life. And there's a lot of chemicals that are still in plastics that are known to be harmful because they're endocrine disruptors or carcinogenic. And so a number of, countries are really starting to work on this on their own, whether it's banning some of the most harmful products based on what's ending up in the environment or the chemicals that are in plastic. But for this to really be effective, we might need some global action on this. A
Uh-huh.
lot of the countries that have a lot of political power are also oil producing countries. So there's a bit of an uphill battle for a number of these countries that have been advocating for a strong and effective global plastics treaty. That seems to have stalled out a little bit because a number of the plastic producers don't want to see that move forward. So we'll see. I think a lot of the regulations now happening at the national level, and that still can
Okay.
continue. But there is an incentive for countries that produce a lot of oil to keep producing a lot of plastic.
Crazy. So really, like, if there's less pull from customers, if we're just like not want, like, if they can't sell it, like, I know that's very micro, come down to the individual, but you know, if there's no demand, like if you stop wanting to consume as much, yeah, you can't be pumping oil for no reason. If so, I don't know. I just find that insane that we're actually getting pressure from the top down to use more plastic. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this
Yeah.
is insane. Like, but yeah, good to understand. It's a big, big,
Just to
massive thing.
to flip a bit of the overwhelm because
Sorry,
there's a
thank
lot of
you.
it. I just would love to know, like, you've been in this, I mean, you've got your PhD in this kind of subject matter. You're working with an incredible organization of Five Gyres. What gives you hope going forward? Like, what keeps you engaged and what makes you hopeful for the future? What do you see?
I do see a lot of hopeful things every day, whether it's innovations of new materials, improved waste management and technology that's helping facilitate that, or redesign to products that are using materials that we've traditionally used or reuse systems that date back for many, many generations and communities. So I think there's a lot of really exciting things that are happening. It doesn't always break through our frenetic news cycle that is so focused
Yes.
on politics, but there are a lot of exciting things that are happening there and solutions that are really targeting the problem and looking at solutions for textiles or other types of microplastics in the environment. So that's really what fuels me and keeps me excited and keeps me going to study what's happening to plastic and how to prevent it. There's just so many great people out there who are trying to do the right thing.
So cool.
And as new parent, we're parents as well. Just there's hope for that future generation that they're going to live in a cleaner world, that some of these technologies will have made it through, that there is a brighter future if we're all collectively moving in that direction.
Yeah, and not just passing on to them as the next
Yeah,
generation to solve this problem, but there's really a number of actions that we can take now that we already know are better. And so let's not wait.
amazing. And last question, Lisa, if there's one message you'd love for the people watching or listening to this today to take away from this conversation, one interesting fact or one
Or a
bigger
tip
picture
or
or
a
a tip,
trick.
what would you share?
Well, one thing that I have really started doing as I started going down this microfibers rabbit hole is how to reduce my overall shedding. So being intentional about the types of clothing that I buy, but how I wash it. That's really one thing that's really changed for me. Washing things less frequently. A number of garments you don't even really need to wash very often. Levi's recommends you hang your jeans to dry, and a number of blue jean companies that just say like don't wash your jeans. Like denim, you don't really need to wash very often. You can
Yep.
put it on the line or air it out hanging in your closet, but you don't need to wash it every single time you wear it. We're finding blue jean fibers in Arctic snow and deep sediment in these remote areas. We're finding these all over. So by reducing the amount that you wash can make a difference. And some things are really gross and smelly after you wear it, like a polyester t-shirt, but other things like a wool sweater, you can
Yeah.
wear
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot without having to throw it in the wash.
So true.
Amazing.
It's a great tip.
Dr. Lisa Erdle, excuse me, it's such a pleasure. We'd love to chat with you again for sure. The work that Five Gyres is doing, we'll put more information about that along with these videos and how people can get involved. But thank you so much for your time and
Yeah,
your
educating us.
energy and what you are doing for this planet and, our future generations. So grateful for people like you.
Thank you
Thanks
so,
so
so
much.
much.